welcome to Pulse by AlphaWire, the podcast where science and education meet cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence. My name is Aldo and each week I sit down with innovators, thinkers and doers who are working to change our world for the better. Together we explore their journeys, uncover the lessons they've learned, and take the entrepreneurial pulse that drives them on their path to success. I deeply enjoyed speaking to Isabelle Hau, Executive Director at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. We speak about her book, Love to Learn, the transformative power of care and connection in early education, and how important it is for kids to learn how to build relationships. Isabelle is an expert in creating and understanding impact, specifically in education, previously having worked for the Omidyar Network, Imaginable Futures, and Morgan Stanley. She's an absolute force of nature and earned an MBA from Harvard Business School, graduated from ESSEC Business School and Sciences Po in Paris. One of her proud life moments was a feature with Grover of Sesame Street on early childhood innovation. It was a great honor to chat to her. Please enjoy my conversation with Isabelle Hau.
Thank you, Aldo, for having me.
Yes, and I couldn't be more excited because we have something very important to discuss. Your book, Love to Learn, the transformative power of care and connection in early education. I want to get all into that. I'm double invested as someone who cares about education, but also as the father of a 6-year-old who is a little bit beyond her early learning stages, but still very relevant, specifically what love and connection and the relationship mainly with her father can do for her. So want to dive into that. But of course, I also want to talk to you about the important work of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. And let's start there. And I looked at the website and I just want to read this before I let you comment, because I thought it was so well put that the accelerator focuses on learning challenges most in need of new discoveries, evidence, and solutions where we believe Stanford can make the most difference, can make the biggest difference. Explain yourself. What is this all about?
Yeah, so Aldo, you know this, but Stanford University, and especially at the Graduate School of Education, but also in other schools, we sit on extraordinary research and knowledge about how humans learn. And that knowledge often doesn't get translated into practical applications, whether it's in the form of education technology tools or whether it's in the form of teacher practices in classrooms. So that's what we are after at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, is how can we embed all learning environments with more research-infused practices for impacting each and every learner on this planet.
Yeah. And so you say a translation, so you're looking for practical application, but kind of almost, you want to make sure it's a well-informed one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So not only knowledge diffusion from research into practice and impact, but also potentially some tools, some change in policies and practice and all these things that impact our learning environments, how educators and teachers practice their craft, all of those things, that's what we are working on. So yeah, so a really exciting work where we leverage about 100 faculty affiliates on campus across all 7 schools. And then about at this point, 250 students who are also excited. And this is an area that really drives a lot of joy for me to see these young people driven by purpose to build a brighter future of learning for all.
Yeah. And well, that's amazing, and amazing that you brought together such a very big community. We spoke just before we hit the record button. We mentioned we spoke 2 years ago. I had the great pleasure and honor of interviewing you then as well. And am I correct to assume that you had then just started, that it was like a recent...
Exactly, Aldo. So I joined Stanford about 3 years ago. So when we met, I was maybe about a year into my job, and now 3 years into it, and really seeing more and more impact from our work every day. We actually estimate at this point that our work has contributed to impacting in some ways, and that's always like a difficult way to measure, but about 5 million learners
Wow.
and more every day. So that's exciting.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Can you, I know that's difficult, and it might be asking you to say who's your favorite child, but is there any project that stands out for you? What are you most proud of in the now going on, 3 years that you've been there?
Yeah, so you're right, Aldo. Picking one is always difficult, but let me try to highlight one that's just representative of, this incredible portfolio. We have about 160 projects at this point, so it's really one,
A
okay,
lot.
out of many. It's one called the ROAR, and that's an abbreviation for the Rapid Online Assessment for Reading, which is an assessment tool for early reading and very effective for children with dyslexia.
Okay. Yeah.
In the US and in many parts of the world, we identify approximately 5% of children with dyslexia, but it's estimated that it's about between 20 and 25% of children who are struggling with some dyslexia. So there's a big gap between, the identification and then the ability to provide supports for those children. And also the other big issue with dyslexia and early reading is that the earlier, and it applies to many other areas of learning, but certainly for early reading and dyslexia, the earlier a problem is identified, the better and most appropriate supports a child can receive. And also, I would add that if a child is not identified early for these struggles, there may be additional issues such as bullying, such as, self-esteem issues that may arise naturally in that child's lives. It's very important to try to identify those challenges as early as possible and provide the appropriate supports. So that tool does exactly that. It's a online assessment, so very easy to administer and very effective, as well as has been evidenced by our research to be effective starting in very, very early, even in kindergarten or even in pre-K. So that's just a really, really interesting tool where we at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning supported that effort very early on with some initial seed funding and then technology supports and then partnership supports, fundraising supports, and so forth. Very proud to say that tool has been adopted by California as one of the 4 screeners that California is mandated for every school to adopt over the next few years.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's exciting. It's one very impactful, of course, for children, for families, very backed by research, and now scaling, which is
Yeah. And
nice. Yeah.
And the scaling, and this is my last question about the accelerator, but the scaling, am I correct to understand that it's a methodology that you kind of pass on to teachers and or stakeholders for them to identify dyslexia with the children? Is it a method of sorts, or what's the package like? Is it like a platform or a system, or how should I think of it?
Yeah, it's an online platform paired with some professional learning for teachers. But at the core of it is this online assessment tool that
Okay. Yeah.
teachers can administer in their classroom with young children.
Wonderful. And now we're going to stay with early learning because I was dying to talk to you about your second book, I believe, right? Am I correct?
No, first
Oh,
one,
your first book. I'm so sorry.
first one.
I'm so
I
sorry.
had contributed to other books in chapter formats or other
Okay.
contributions, but this is my first
Your first book. Well,
book.
it's made so much noise that I thought there were 2 books.
You're so kind, Aldo.
No, but it's an amazing book. Love to Learn: The Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education. And the gist of it is children need to be loved and valued. We need to interact with them and they need to be listened to. And it is these loving relations and relationships that that are the building blocks for them to start growing as individuals and to start learning, right? And that's easier said than done. That's, of course, lovely language. But in this day and age, with all the crazy technologies that our modern society brings along, as well as the way we live, it's not that easy. Yeah, I have 1,000 questions, but did I summarize this correctly, or is there more to it?
Aldo, you summarize it very well. In essence, there is a long and very deep body of research called the science of relationships that shows, and I'm happy to go into more details, more research, more studies, that essentially shows that we humans have social brains, and those social brains form very early through human connections. Yet, as you pointed out, those human connections that are critical for children, for humans, but certainly children to learn, contracting right now for a variety of societal reasons. And so there is an urgent call here to, rethink some of our schools, some of our family interactions, community interactions, so that we can really build better those human relationships that are so critical for children to learn and thrive.
There were lots of things that come to mind, and you also mentioned kind of challenges. So you say kind of in the olden days, families were bigger, families are getting smaller, less children per family. Single parent families is also more often heard of. It happens a lot more. Then there's, I believe, the elements of challenges that technology bring along, whereby we think we're simulating love or a relationship, but actually we're doing the opposite. Kind of, so all those bits and pieces, which of the ones that you kind of listed do you feel is the biggest hurdle to build a good relationship, to start that process of love and nurture?
Yeah, I think there are three big ones. One is the one on the demographics that you already alluded to. So families getting smaller. The clear implications is that children are being raised in not only smaller family units, but also have less siblings as a result. So, for example, in the US, it's a US stat, but the number of families with a single child has doubled in the past 10 years or so. So nothing wrong about having a single child, but there are implications about how children develop relationships as a result of that. Also, the other big trend demographically is grandparents. So grandparents tend to, increasingly live further and further away. It's a case for my very own family. That also has implications given the evolution as a human species that has actually relied so much on grandparents as a core of our family structures. One stat, by the way, this is not on grandparents, it's on grand adults, that really surprised me and continue to surprise me. I put a little chart actually on one of the pages because I thought it was so interesting and concerning. Only 3% of children have ever met an adult above age 65 who is not a family member. So we live in age-segregated societies, essentially, where families are not interacting with older adults, which is fascinating as a stat.
Yeah.
So that's number one, is demographics. Number two is the attitude that we have relative to play. Is really fascinating, and there are lots of colleagues that have studied this, but essentially there is less and less free play as well as guided play, but especially free play is in decline. And probably an obvious point, but one of my researcher colleagues actually has proven that point. The more children play, the more they have human little friends. So play is also very important for social connections and relationships.
And by free play, you mean improvising? Just let them.
Yeah.
Or on a Sunday morning, just go play and,
Exactly. It could be at recess. It could be at home. There are two types of play. Generally, you have a free play, unstructured largely, and then guided play, which, you're providing, for example, guided blocks or Legos. That would be more guided play if there are instructions. Yeah. And then the third one is technology. Listen, technology has had a huge impact on human connections and continues to have And I think we are seeing also some really concerning trends with artificial intelligence at the moment, with how this technology is reshaping our very own human connections, which I'm happy to also speak more about.
Yeah, I mean, so full disclosure, I have one child. I'm a parent of one beautiful daughter that is loved very much, but it's just the one. So I empathize with that. So I'm very interested in that one. But in my own challenge, right, in my own learning trajectory as a 46-year-old man, I see that technology is challenging. I wouldn't be the only father or only parent who's worried about how that is going to be digested by my daughter or by her children, because this seems to be developing at lightning pace. What is technology today isn't tomorrow. And specifically when you see AI, so just before we started this interview, I was just making sure I had all the kind of things in order, and I was on LinkedIn, and then I came across a post where someone is simulating a picture of himself with a movie star. And he says, "Oh, can you believe it? I'm not with this movie star, but I'm so proud that I created an AI picture of me with that movie star." Thousands of likes of people saying, "This looks so real." And I'm like, why are we rewarding this, this run on, I've tricked you? What is our fascination with trickery? And what do we think to get out of it in terms of our own learning? Because we're kind of fascinated, like, oh, AI tricked us. It really looks real that I'm here with, let's say, the Pope or, whoever, whilst I'm not. How do we want our children to work around that? Because, this is just one example, right? And then there's the element of what will learning look like for children, because that is also like, do they just need to learn how to master AI, or like how to work with something like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, or is it going to be different?
Yeah, Aldo, there are so many great questions here. So maybe stepping back for 1 second. So I think technology has two levels of impact on our children. One is a direct-to-child technology. So if a child is using a technology tool or a device, that's one. And then the other one is when the adults are using technology interferences, with which one of my colleagues has renamed technoference, where technology interrupts a human relationship, also have interesting and negative, for the most part, impact on our children. So let me start with the second one, and then let me go back to child-facing technologies. For adults at this point, that's a stat from this past year, and it's a US stat, but I assume this is very close worldwide. We pick up our device, the average American picks up their device 205 times per day. Yeah. Yeah. And we can all check our averages on our phone, the data that's available on most phones. My stat was actually a little higher when I checked a few weeks ago, so no judgment on others here.
Yeah.
The reality is that we are checking those devices a lot, and as a result of this, the child sees this. He sees us as adults looking at our phones, and the message that it conveys to children is that maybe the phone is more important than they are. In addition to potentially breaking or interrupting a conversation, if this is a notification or a text message that the adult has to tend for. Then technology for children, there is one particular area you're discussing about misinformation and how we are going to be able to make sense of this rise of misinformation. That's a complicated issue in absence of policy and ways to mark that information. But there is another area that I'm also very intrigued but also concerned. I think there's potential for good, but right now mostly potential for bad, which is the area of companionship. There are two surveys that just came out, one from Common Sense Media in the US and one from Internet Matters in the UK, that are essentially have exactly the same results that suggest that this is done for teenagers, but that at this point, 72% of teenagers in the US, that's the Common Sense Media data, have been using at least one AI companion tool.
Yeah.
And more than 50% are using them regularly. The problem with those companions at this time, they are completely unregulated and relying on data that we don't really understand fully. There is a recent study by my colleagues at Harvard that suggests that there is a lot of emotional manipulation. A lot of those tools have emotional manipulation.
I know what to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
They know
yep,
what to, yeah.
exactly. And the other concerning data point on those companions is that the more you use them, the less you are inclined to actually connect with the real world. So the less friendships you essentially make. So that's also another real concerning area where it could be solved with some the right policy or guidelines if children were using those platforms as training grounds, if you like, for if someone has social anxiety or someone on the autism spectrum, maybe it could be helpful, but as long as there is an off-ramp to the real world, which right now there is zero incentives for those organizations to do so. So at the moment, they actually have an incentive to keep you on the platform.
I think one of the questions I feel we need to ask is what makes you think such a tool could be a companion in the first place?
Yeah.
How did we get in the situation whereby we identify a technology tool as a companion, right? Where we confide in it. And I think just my little experience with that is, and again, this is my age group, so not has nothing to do with early learning, but I ask ChatGPT sometimes questions that I feel I cannot bother anyone else with. And they are not psychological, so I don't use it as a therapist. But to give an example, what I did do is like I developed a morning workout routine. And I kind of asked, like, okay, am I doing this the right way?
Yeah.
Is build up okay? Should I do it longer? Should I do it shorter? So I do understand how you can get into the rabbit hole of this. Like I'm just asking it questions on what is common practice for my workout routine. These are questions that I can't really, I'm sure my wife would love to help, but she's not an expert in that. So I kind of start looking around, like, who can I ask these questions to? And I end up asking it to ChatGPT. And I can imagine this is now just for me, but I can imagine another form of that for someone a lot younger saying like, well, I can't really bother anyone else with this question because no one is really an expert. So let me ask, that's where I could see it starting, right? Such a journey. But it bothers me, and I feel it disturbing as well that I said, like, why am I asking this to this tool, right? I should go talk to someone in a gym or an expert who knows a little bit more about that if I have these questions. Yet it's too tempting to ask.
Yeah, no, Aldo, you're pointing to exactly the right question. We have done a study at Stanford that was with young adults using one of those AI companion platforms being called replica.ai. What we observed is that people who feel more lonely are more likely to use those platforms. So there is clearly a sense that maybe one of big area for all of us to ponder about is, the why. And the why seems to be connected to the lack of human relationships and
Yeah.
human connections that our young people are feeling these days. These platforms are almost like filling a void for a lot of people. There may be also spaces where they may be very helpful. Access to, for example, a therapist at night might be helpful if you don't have, as you pointed out, access to a human, this may be a better alternative, but with the right guardrails, with the right and right now the problem is that we have very little guardrails. So
Yeah,
that's
and
the issue that we're having, is that there may be some really positive use cases and very good reasons for why our young people are using those tools. All of this is fine as long as we have a set of ethical practices without emotional manipulation, for example, or, Meta, for example, recently there was a leak where they were using some sexual manipulation for our young people, minors. I mean, this is not something that should be tolerated, obviously. That's an area, I feel like, where there is clear need for guardrails, maybe policy, and certainly ethical practices, so that we protect our young children.
yeah, let alone confidentiality, right? So we had Sam Altman, a recent interview at Theo Von, which is a big podcaster. And Sam Altman, in introducing ChatGPT 5, said, like, if you use it as a therapist, I'd suggest you don't, because it's not under any kind of confidentiality clause with you. The information you provided, it is free to kind of share it. And he said it also as, we're trying to tackle this problem, but it is not currently, that's not how this works. And
Correct.
I the reason why he said it is like, he's noticed that a lot of people do. But what I find particularly interesting is the ground problem. And I think you mentioned it in the very beginning, whereby people feel, and maybe children feel, that the ones that are caring for them don't have time for them because the phone's in the middle or something like that. They feel maybe many of their concerns are trivial and that they should reside to technology for a solution because, hey, the parents are doing it as well because they're continuously on their phone as well. So why wouldn't you, right? Or maybe we're giving them the wrong example unintentionally, but maybe that's where this comes from. It's like, well, this is where you ask these questions. We give off that impression.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, again, about your beautiful question on why, ideally, we would collectively think more about how can we build a vibrant relational infrastructure for our young children, for our families, for our educators, to really focus on relationships as opposed to blaming the technology. Technology might just be, literally a solution to a root cause. The technology might actually be addressing a broader problem. So how could we get to the bottom of it by refocusing on love, on relationships? And those themes are so profoundly human. We all know that this matters, but I think that we are taking them for granted. So how can we societally have a much greater focus on them? For example, how could we make schools relational hubs and ensure that relationships between teachers and children, between children among peers, between children and staff in the school, between parents and teachers, all these relationships are community members, maybe older people could come more into schools. You see what I mean? Like all these interactions are fostered as opposed to the models that we have right now that, just pretend that we focus on love and relationships in schools, but not really.
No,
It's an afterthought.
I think you're right. I think we need a more profound understanding what love and relationship really means, what that
Yeah.
really is. But it'll take some soul searching for all of us, right? Because it's kind of like, what's the setup here? It sounds like we all have good intentions, but as they say about the road to hell, right? It's kind of, we all think it's loving and caring, and specifically with the community of parents coming together, everyone what's best for their child, right? That could be based on such a good intention of wanting to provide that, very robust relationship, loads of love, loads of nurturing and all those things. But maybe if we use the wrong tools for it, it might not work out the way we think that it's going to work out. And that is, I think, something we should be aware of. One of the examples, again, going back to my own stories, like we're already working with parents to make sure that our children will not have smartphones. They're now 6, right? So, but we say we don't want them. We don't want them, hopefully not for their entire kind of primary school. If you need a device to call, there's this watch type that they can text or something. But going with Jonathan Haidt's book about, really depression with children and kind of those things, we're already lobbying and, have already parents with us like, no, we're not going to touch any phones and whatever, but, we're following those recommendations. And we hope that that's the way, right? That we say, well, let them play together as much as they can outside, and if they need us, they can send us a text message or, tops with the device that they have if they really need to have one. But that's it. No applications, no other form of communication until they're good and ready with their brain to get onto technology. What I'm trying to say is we think that that's the way, but maybe it's not, right? Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, I think this is part of the answer. And again, I would also add some good reflections for all of us as parents and family members about our very own behaviors as adults with technology. So, for example, very simple recommendations that Jonathan Haidt and others have been promoting too is ensuring that that family dinners, for example, are protected from any device. So device should be put in a basket or some other place where they are not disturbing a very precious time. Families who have dinner together, there's a lot of research on the benefit of dinner time. Dinner time may not be, some families may be working at night. So dinner time is just one example. It could be other times during the day, but the essence of having some time as a family together that's protected from any device, both child and adult, I think is a key message. But it's crazy, Aldo. I mean, I quote some of the stats in my book, but for example, there is one research that had looked at behaviors from parents on playgrounds and showed that the observation was on a 20-minute play observation on the playground. And 75% of the parents were 15 minutes or more out of those 20 minutes on their device. So essentially, they are not looking at their child. They are not interacting with the child. They are not interacting with other parents on the playground. You see what I mean? Like this is and again, there's no judgment from me. We are all, thinking about these, but the adult piece is also very important reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I confess, I also look so many times at my phone. Many times that I look, I don't see anything. I'm still looking, right? And I have reason to believe that the applications that I use in their development are made to be addictive. So they want me to come back to these tools, right?
Yeah.
So I really need to stop myself in my tracks and say, I'm not doing this. I'm stop using them, because I think if you would call out any parent, they would right away throw it away if you call them out on it. But yeah, I think we need to be introspective enough to say, well, hey, we're a little bit addicted as well on these applications. It's also our brain that is doing this, right?
Exactly.
And what can we do to reduce our addiction here? Maybe be less on social platforms, or do less, or do it in a certain time slot, or kind of all those things, which isn't easy. And again, no judgment. It isn't easy, but it is something that we should all look at, because we can't have the expectation that our child should not be on a device if we are all the time, right? That's an unfair assumption. So
Exactly. There's obviously clearly also, parents are first child teachers, so there's also a modeling effect. The child sees that parent or adult cares about that device. So there's also this modeling effect that's very obvious that happens for younger children. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest positive takeaway of the book? It's amazing. Okay, I love to learn, and I like the fact, let's nurture, let's provide love. It's not going to be easy, but it can be done. Where do you think, which one message would you like people to remember, from your book, if they, let's say in 20 years,
Yeah, no, there is one key one, which is that not only today, this concept of relationships is highly predictive of long-term success, but I believe that relationships will actually become more and more and more important in our future societies as one of the core components that can't be replicated by technology. And so as a result, this focus on what I call relational intelligence as an alternative, and I call it RQ, as an alternative or as a complement to IQ or EQ, I think is our future. So not only today we know this is highly predictive of long-term success, but also that this will become even increasingly more and more predictive of long-term
By
success.
that you mean, by RQ, you mean our capacity to build relationships.
Exactly, to relate and connect and empathize.
So maybe kind of what is the difference between emotional intelligence and then RQ, as you said? What's the difference between EQ and RQ? Or
Yeah.
is there none? Maybe I don't maybe.
So they are close cousins, but they are a little bit different. EQ is emotional intelligence, which is a very self-view, whereas relational intelligence is our capacity to connect and relate with others. So for relational intelligence, the social networks and other things matter a lot, whereas it doesn't matter for EQ, which is very self-based.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to specify, it is our capacity to build human relations, meaning person to person. It's not our capacity to build relationship online, right? Because there are applications that sell themselves with the pretension that they will help you to build relationships online. That is not the type of relationship you refer to, or is it included?
It's primarily focused on human relationships because it's, again, the research is extremely strong on the importance of human-to-human connections. There is an emerging body of research on the biological effects of machine relationships. Honestly, this is nascent. We don't really know and understand yet what it does, what some of the benefits. So right now what I'm speaking about is purely on human relationships. Will there be in the future some form of what Ethan Malik or others are calling co-intelligence, where there will be some human-machine, increasingly human-machine connection? Maybe, but again, we don't really understand yet what are the impacts of all of this on, especially on young brains. So what I'm what I'm really focused on is human relationships, which
No, yeah. No, but I get the part of co-intelligence, which is a very interesting avenue you've taken here. But the one I meant more was dating apps, right? So a relationship is formed, but the means to do it is done through technology, right? So I think my wife and I, we were colleagues. We met each other at work, and that's how that started. But I think nowadays, many people, including some of our friends, met through a dating application. So a relationship emerged because they used technology, right? And I think as this progresses, you're going to see more of these. So relationships can be induced through technology. They're still human. They're two human endpoints, but the means they use is technological one. This might be too far-fetched, but I just wanted to raise, because you could have a good relationship like people had in the olden days. They wrote letters to friends far away, right? That's a relationship. You never see the person. You do an exchange of letters, but that could also happen online. Is that also a relationship? Would that count under RQ, or would you say, well, it's more who you see in person in your own direct environment?
research is not is a little mixed on this, but generally suggests that if, especially for very young children, that really the mediation should be human for synaptic connections to materialize, for language to occur, all these things. For older children, teenagers plus, there are some benefits in, like, for example, I'm thinking gaming. There are certain gaming platforms that have been demonstrated to really foster connections among young people that are really good, really beneficial. It might be the case that, technology can be a pathway to augment some of the human connections, but also really having a profound conversation about where it doesn't and where technology also isolates us further, because right now that's also what the data suggests on AI, is that there is a profound risk of greater isolation, not greater connection.
Isabelle, we could talk for 5 more hours, I think, on this topic, yet I appreciate your time. My last question is always about reading recommendations. And you've had such an interesting career thus far, and you're going at 1,000 miles an hour now, especially with this book. But is there any kind of type of reading that inspired you to do what you're doing today that you care to share with our listeners?
Yeah, there is one that comes to mind straight away. It's a beautiful book called The Book of Joy. It was a collaboration between two amazing spiritual men, the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, across two different faiths. And it's a reflection about the importance of joy in life. Joy and love are a little different feelings, but they are actually close cousins as well. So I think this book has been very formative for me in so many ways.
Nice. That's such a beautiful recommendation. And I've heard of it when it came out. I think I read snippets of it, maybe a review or an article, but I don't know if I read the actual book. So that's going to go on my list, most definitely. Isabelle, the people can buy Love to Learn, the transformative power of care and connection in early education. Everywhere it has the highest and best reviews on Amazon, and a big congratulations for this book. I can imagine it's been quite a year for you with this book coming out and spreading the word about it. But I think it's very well deserved. So my hats off to you, and thank you for talking about the book here on our little show.
Aldo, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be, and a joy to be reconnecting with you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
You've listened to Pulse by AlphaWire, produced by Natalie Piles and Amela Faisal, with great music, The Optimist, written by Holly Hamill, performed and produced by Aldo. Episodes hosted weekly by me, Aldo the Pape.